must do this. Powerful insights. There is a quiet mistake that can change the entire direction of a relationship with an avoidant, and most people make it while believing they are doing the right thing. When someone begins pulling away, the natural reaction is often to move closer. You text more. You explain your feelings again. You give more reassurance. You try harder to prove that your love is real. You become more available because you are afraid that giving them space might make them disappear completely. But here is the part most people never realize. The harder you try to hold on, the more trapped the other person may begin to feel. And when closeness starts feeling like pressure, an avoidantly attached person may protect themselves by creating even more distance. This does not automatically mean they do not care. Avoidant attachment can involve a strong need for independence and a tendency to reduce emotional vulnerability when intimacy begins to feel overwhelming. That is why understanding their behavior requires more than asking, "How do I make them stay?" The better question is, how do I create a relationship where staying feels safe? And that is where this video becomes different. Because we are not going to talk about manipulation, jealousy, silent treatment, or psychological games designed to make an avoidant chase you. We are going deeper than that. You will learn why giving space can either strengthen a relationship or quietly destroy it, depending on how you give it. You will learn why emotional safety does not mean hiding your feelings, why consistency can be more powerful than intense displays of love, and why having your own identity may actually create more room for genuine intimacy. We will also uncover why chasing an avoidant during every withdrawal can create a cycle that keeps both people emotionally stuck, and why boundaries are often more powerful than endless reassurance. Most importantly, you will discover the one major shift that changes the entire dynamic. It is not about becoming perfect for them. It is not about becoming less emotional, and it is certainly not about convincing someone to love you. It is about creating a connection where two people can experience closeness without feeling controlled, and independence without feeling abandoned. Stay until the end because the final realization may completely change the way you look at avoidant behavior, love, and your own role in the relationship. And remember, understanding attachment can explain certain patterns, but it never excuses disrespect, dishonesty, manipulation, or emotional neglect. You deserve a relationship where both people are willing to grow. Welcome to our channel, where we explore psychology, relationships, and the hidden patterns behind human behavior. If you want more deep insights like this, subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because what comes next may explain what your relationship has been missing all along. Give them space without turning space into punishment. The first shift happens when you stop treating distance like an emergency. When an avoidant person pulls back, the instinct of someone who deeply cares can be to close the gap immediately. You want answers. You want reassurance. You want to know what changed. So you send another message, explain yourself again, ask if everything is okay, or try to remind them how much you care. And from your perspective, this can feel like love. You are trying to protect the connection before it disappears. But from the other side, especially for someone with strong avoidant patterns, repeated attempts to close the distance can sometimes feel like the very pressure they were trying to escape. This is where space becomes important. But there is a major difference between giving someone space and using space as a weapon. Healthy space communicates, "I care about you, and I respect that you need time." Punitive space communicates, "I am going to disappear so you finally understand what you are losing." Those two behaviors may look similar from the outside, but emotionally they create completely different experiences. Healthy space lowers pressure. Punitive space creates another form of pressure. It turns silence into a message. It turns absence into a test. It turns every unanswered text into a calculated move. And once that happens, the relationship stops feeling like a relationship and starts feeling like a psychological game. One person is waiting to see if the other will come back. The other is wondering whether reaching out will create another emotional confrontation. Both people become focused on the reaction instead of the connection. This is one of the lesser-known problems with trying to make an avoidant miss you. If your distance is designed to create fear, the other person may not experience it as safety. They may experience it as another demand. They may think, "Now I am expected to react correctly," and that can reinforce the very pattern you are trying to change. Avoidant attachment is often associated with strategies that reduce emotional vulnerability and protect a sense of independence when closeness feels threatening. That does not mean every person who needs space is avoidant, and it certainly does not mean every withdrawal is secretly a sign of love. But when someone repeatedly becomes uncomfortable with emotional intensity, respecting their need for breathing room can be healthier than trying to force immediate closeness. The important part is what you do with that space. You do not need to chase them. But you also do not need to punish them. You do not need to send 10 messages explaining why they are wrong. But you also do not need to disappear for 3 weeks hoping they will panic. You can simply step back while remaining emotionally grounded. There is strength in being able to say, "I am here when you are ready to communicate," and then actually give them room to do so. That kind of response sends a very different message. It says that closeness with you does not mean losing control of their life. It says that needing a little time does not automatically create conflict. It says that you can tolerate temporary distance without turning it into a crisis. And that can matter because emotional safety is not created by eliminating every moment of distance. It is created by showing that distance does not automatically lead to chaos. Think about what happens when every withdrawal is met with pursuit. They step back. You move closer. They become quiet. You ask more questions. They ask for space. You become more anxious. Your anxiety increases their pressure, and their pressure increases your anxiety. Before long, both people are reacting to each other, instead of responding thoughtfully. This is how a cycle becomes established. The avoidant withdraws, because closeness feels overwhelming. The other person pursues because withdrawal feels frightening. The pursuit increases the avoidant's desire for distance. The increased distance creates even more anxiety. Then the pursuit becomes stronger. At that point, neither person is necessarily doing what they truly want to do. They are responding to fear. That is why giving space can sometimes be an act of emotional maturity, rather than emotional weakness. It means you are refusing to let fear make every decision for you. It means you can care about someone without constantly monitoring their behavior. It means you can allow a conversation to breathe, instead of forcing an answer before the other person is emotionally ready to have it. But there is another side that matters just as much. Giving space does not mean accepting indefinite silence. It does not mean tolerating disrespect. It does not mean allowing someone to disappear whenever responsibility enters the relationship. It does not mean convincing yourself that emotional neglect is simply how avoidants are. Understanding attachment can help explain patterns, but it should never become an excuse for unhealthy behavior. You still deserve communication. You still deserve consistency. You still deserve to know where you stand. The healthiest form of space has a quiet structure behind it. There is room, but there is also respect. There is independence, but there is still connection. There is patience, but there is also accountability. You might communicate your need clearly, and then step back. Instead of saying, "Fine, do whatever you want," you can say, "I understand that you need some time. I am willing to give you that space, but I also want us to come back to this conversation when we are both ready." That sentence changes the entire emotional atmosphere. There is no threat. No manipulation, no begging, no punishment, just clarity. And clarity is powerful because it removes the need for games. You are not trying to make them afraid of losing you. You are showing them that you are secure enough to respect their independence while still respecting your own needs. This is where many people misunderstand what it means to be attractive to an avoidant. They think the answer is becoming completely unavailable. They stop replying quickly. They act indifferent. They pretend they do not care. They post things designed to make the other person jealous. They hope the avoidant will suddenly realize what they have lost. Sometimes this may create a reaction, but a reaction is not the same thing as emotional security. Someone can miss your attention and still be unable to build a healthy relationship with you. Someone can become afraid of losing you and still remain emotionally unavailable. Someone can chase you after you disappear and then repeat the same distancing pattern once they feel close again. That is why the real goal should never be to create fear. The goal is to create a relationship where both people can breathe. Space should reduce pressure, not create fear. That principle becomes even more important when you understand that an avoidant person may sometimes need time to process emotions before they can communicate clearly. Not everyone can instantly explain what they feel. Some people become more defensive when they are pushed to produce emotional answers on demand. Giving them a moment does not guarantee that they will return or change, but it can prevent the conversation from becoming a battle. And that is the difference between giving someone space because you trust the relationship, and giving someone space because you want to manipulate the outcome. One comes from security, the other comes from fear. The first says, "I can step back without losing myself." The second says, "I will step back so you finally understand my value." Those may sound similar, but they come from completely different emotional places. When you can step back without obsessively checking whether they have noticed, you begin to reclaim your own emotional stability. You stop measuring your worth by their response. You stop asking whether they miss you every hour. You stop interpreting every online activity as a secret message. And that shift matters because the healthiest relationship dynamic is not one person constantly pursuing and another constantly escaping. It is two people who can move closer and farther apart without turning every movement into a threat. They can have separate interests and still care deeply. They can spend time alone and still remain connected. They can disagree without immediately questioning the entire relationship. They can ask for space without using silence as punishment, and they can return to each other without having to win a psychological battle first. This is what emotional safety begins to look like. It is not constant closeness. It is the confidence that closeness can survive a little breathing room. So when an avoidant pulls back, the question is not, how do I make them come running back? The better question is, can I respond in a way that protects both their autonomy and my dignity? That question changes your behavior completely. You stop chasing. You stop performing indifference. You stop creating tests. You stop using silence as revenge. Instead, you become calm, clear, and consistent. You give space because you understand that pressure rarely creates genuine intimacy. And while that space exists, you return your attention to your own life, your own goals, your own friendships, and your own emotional center. You are not sitting around waiting for permission to feel okay again. You are allowing the relationship to breathe while continuing to live your own life. And when the other person eventually reaches back toward connection, the relationship has a better chance of becoming a place where closeness feels chosen rather than forced. That is the real power of space. Not making someone fear your absence, but showing that love can exist without possession, that independence can exist without abandonment, and that two people can have room to breathe without losing the connection between them. Don't chase them through every withdrawal. One of the fastest ways to turn emotional distance into a repeating cycle is to respond to every withdrawal with more pursuit. It often begins with something very small. The person becomes quieter. Their replies become shorter. They seem less emotionally available. Maybe they stop initiating conversations as often. You notice the change, and suddenly your mind starts searching for an explanation. You wonder if they are losing interest. You wonder if you did something wrong. You wonder if there is someone else. And because uncertainty feels uncomfortable, you try to remove it. You send another message, then another. You ask what is wrong. You explain that you only want to understand. You tell them that you are there for them. You ask whether they still care. But instead of bringing them closer, all of this attention can sometimes make them retreat even further. Now the pattern has started. They withdraw. You pursue. You pursue. They feel more pressure. They feel more pressure, so they withdraw again. Their withdrawal makes you even more anxious, and your anxiety makes you pursue even harder. Neither person necessarily wants this cycle, but both become trapped inside it. The important thing to understand is that pursuit is not always the same thing as connection. Sometimes pursuit is fear looking for reassurance, and when fear controls the relationship, even genuine love can begin to feel like pressure. This is especially important when dealing with someone who has strong avoidant patterns. When emotional intensity rises, they may respond by creating distance, focusing on other parts of life, becoming quieter, or trying to regain a sense of independence. That does not automatically mean they have stopped caring. It also does not automatically mean they secretly want you to chase them. This is where many relationship videos get the psychology wrong. Withdrawal should not be treated as a secret invitation to pursue harder. Sometimes withdrawal simply means the person is overwhelmed, emotionally uncomfortable, uncertain, or trying to regulate themselves. The healthier response is not panic, it is calm. Instead of immediately filling every silence, allow a little room. Instead of sending a long emotional message because they have not replied, pause. Instead of demanding an answer before they are ready to speak, communicate your need clearly and then give the conversation room to develop. This does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean pretending you do not care. It means refusing to turn another person's temporary distance into an emergency. There is a powerful difference between saying, "You need space, so I am going to punish you with silence," and saying, "I understand that you need some breathing room, and I am going to respect that while also taking care of myself." The first is a strategy. The second is security. And security changes the entire emotional atmosphere. When you stop chasing every withdrawal, you remove one of the strongest sources of pressure in the relationship. The other person no longer has to manage your reaction before they can manage their own emotions. They are not thinking, "If I take some time for myself, I will have to deal with 10 messages when I come back." They are not expecting an argument every time they need quiet. They are not preparing themselves for another emotional interrogation. Instead, they begin to experience a different kind of relationship environment. There can be distance without punishment. There can be space without abandonment. There can be independence without immediately creating a crisis. But there is an important boundary here. Giving space does not mean allowing someone to disappear indefinitely. You should not have to accept days or weeks of unexplained silence simply because someone has an avoidant attachment style. You can respect their need for space while still having standards for communication. You can say, in simple terms, I understand that you need some time. I am willing to give you that, but I also need us to communicate respectfully when you are ready. That is not chasing, that is clarity. You are not demanding immediate emotional intimacy, but you are also not abandoning your own needs. This is what it means to give space without abandoning yourself. And that same principle becomes even more important when the other person finally begins to open up. For someone who has learned to rely heavily on themselves, vulnerability may not always feel natural. Emotional exposure can feel risky. They may reveal one small personal thought and then quickly change the subject. They may tell you something painful and then act as if it meant nothing. They may share a fear, a disappointment, or an insecurity and immediately become uncomfortable with the level of closeness that follows. In those moments, your response matters. If every vulnerable moment becomes an opportunity to ask 10 deeper questions, demand more emotional disclosure, or analyze everything they just revealed, they may learn that opening up creates pressure. They may begin to associate vulnerability with losing control. But if you respond with calmness, patience, and genuine appreciation, you create a different experience. You communicate that they do not have to reveal everything at once to be accepted. They can share one piece of themselves without being pushed to expose the entire emotional world behind it. Sometimes the strongest response is surprisingly simple. Listen, acknowledge it, let the moment exist without immediately trying to fix it. That can be especially powerful because emotional safety is not always created through more conversation. Sometimes it is created by what you do not demand. You allow vulnerability to breathe. You let trust develop through repeated experiences rather than forcing one dramatic breakthrough. And as this trust develops, another important shift begins to happen. You start noticing that people do not always express care in the same language. Someone who struggles with emotional expression may still show care through actions. They may help you when you need something. They may remember small details. They may make time when it matters. They may quietly solve problems rather than talk extensively about feelings. They may show consistency in practical ways. These behaviors should not automatically be dismissed simply because they do not look like the kind of affection you expected. Appreciation can help strengthen positive connection. But appreciation should never become an excuse for accepting emotional unavailability forever. You can notice their effort without erasing your needs. You can appreciate the way they show care while still communicating what you require from a healthy relationship. This is where maturity becomes important. You are not trying to train them into becoming a completely different person. You are observing whether both people are capable of moving toward healthier connection, and that naturally brings us to boundaries. A relationship becomes much more stable when both people understand where respect begins and where self-abandonment ends. A boundary is not a threat, it is not a punishment, it is not a trick designed to make someone afraid of losing you. A boundary simply tells another person what you will and will not participate in. For example, saying, if you need space, I can respect that, but I cannot continue a relationship where important conversations are avoided forever, is not controlling, it is honest. You are giving them freedom while also protecting your emotional well-being. This is very different from saying, if you do not reply tonight, I am blocking you so you learn a lesson. That is not a boundary, that is an attempt to control the other person's reaction. Real boundaries do not require dramatic performances. They are calm, they are consistent, and most importantly, you follow through on them. This is also where you need to stop trying to prove that you are the person who can finally heal an avoidant. That role can become emotionally exhausting. You may start believing that if you are patient enough, loving enough, understanding enough, attractive enough, or supportive enough, you can make them overcome every fear they have about intimacy. But another person's emotional growth cannot become your full-time responsibility. You can create a healthier environment. You can communicate differently. You can become more secure in the way you respond. You can show them that closeness does not have to mean control, but you cannot do their inner work for them. You cannot force emotional availability. And you should never have to destroy your own emotional needs just to keep someone comfortable. The deeper shift is realizing that secure love does not require one person to chase while the other person escapes. It creates room for both people to move toward each other freely. There is space without abandonment. There is closeness without control. There is communication without emotional warfare. There are boundaries without threats. There is independence without disconnection. There is vulnerability without humiliation. And there is love without self-abandonment. That is the environment where connection has a chance to become healthier, because neither person has to constantly protect themselves from the other. You are no longer trying to make the avoidant stay through fear, jealousy, pressure, or emotional dependence. You are creating a relationship where staying can become a genuine choice, and that difference matters more than almost any psychological trick, because someone staying out of fear is not the same as someone staying because they feel safe, respected, understood, and free to choose the relationship. Final revelation: you cannot make someone stay. At the end of all of this, there is one truth that matters more than every strategy, every technique, and every psychological insight we discussed. You cannot make someone stay. You can become calmer. You can communicate with more understanding. You can respect their need for space without turning that space into punishment. You can stop chasing. You can build trust. You can create an environment where vulnerability feels safer and where both people have room to breathe. But you cannot control another person's heart, readiness, or choice. And strangely enough, that is not where your power ends. That is where your real power begins. Because love was never supposed to be about convincing someone to choose you. It was never supposed to be about becoming so perfect that they could never leave. It was never supposed to require you to silence your needs, abandon your boundaries, or constantly prove that you are worth staying for. The deeper question is not, how do I make this avoidant stay forever? The deeper question is, can we create a relationship where both of us genuinely want to stay? That question changes everything. Because there is a world of difference between someone staying because they are afraid of losing you, and someone staying because they feel safe enough to choose you. Real security is not making someone terrified of your absence. Real security is creating a connection where closeness does not feel like control, where space does not feel like abandonment, where communication does not feel like a battle, and where love does not require either person to lose themselves. And if an avoidant person chooses to stay in that kind of relationship, it should not be because you discovered the perfect psychological trick. It should be because both of you are learning how to build something healthier. You can offer patience, but you cannot offer it forever without reciprocity. You can offer understanding, but you should never have to understand away your own pain. You can give someone space, but you should never have to disappear inside that space yourself. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that their growth is their responsibility. Sometimes the most secure thing you can do is stop asking, "What can I do to make them stay?" and start asking, "What kind of relationship am I willing to stay in?" That is the question that brings your power back, because your worth does not depend on whether an avoidant chooses you. Your worth was never waiting for their decision. You deserve a relationship where love moves in both directions, where effort is not constantly one-sided, and where you do not have to become smaller just to keep another person comfortable. If they choose you, let it be a real choice. If they need space, let it be space without manipulation. If they return, let them return with responsibility. And if they cannot meet you where you are, have enough strength to choose yourself without turning that choice into revenge. That is the deepest lesson here. You do not need to become impossible to leave. You need to become unwilling to abandon yourself. When you understand that, love stops becoming a desperate attempt to hold someone and becomes a conscious decision to build something meaningful with someone who is willing to build it with you. And that is far more powerful than making anyone stay forever. If this video gave you a deeper understanding of avoidant attachment and helped you see your relationship from a different perspective, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more psychology and relationship insights. If this message connected with you, hit the like button because it helps this video reach someone who may need to hear it. And share this video with someone who is caught in the cycle of chasing, waiting, and wondering what went wrong.